thought that was the most generous thing for them to do.
Yeah.
It was such a gift. So,
now, did you have the name Canopy Life at that point whenever you were doing this launch, or when did that come about? When did you come up with that name?
I'm trying to remember if I believe the name came in the spring of 2014. It was a long process because for years at that point, we had been talking about Daraja Leadership Academy. We knew after the 2012 R&D that we didn't want to use the word leadership in the title. Mm-hmm. And that's because the word leadership has a very different connotation in Kenya. It implies power that you often use for yourself. It implies status and not the kind of servant leadership that we would have intended for it. But also Daraja had such a rich and deep meaning for me. It's the Swahili word for bridge, and it represented a certain kind of culture that we had developed in the choir over the years. So to find a name that represented that same kind of depth was really challenging. Yeah. I'll never forget just spending hours before Zoom was a thing, I would spend hours on Zoom with people in my dining room, and we'd have Post-it notes up on the wall trying to figure out what to call it. But it came from Canopy Life came from a couple different sources. When the vision first came to me in 2006, my sister had this saying called Splendor Tree. And it was this idea after Isaiah 61 that and they shall be a planting of the Lord for a display of his splendor. And it talks about oaks of righteousness. And that scripture had meant a lot to me in my 2003 trip to Kenya. And so I love this idea of a planting of the Lord, like this strong oak tree for the display of his splendor. But we knew we couldn't use that name because a lot of our Kenyans are Kikuyu and they switch their L's and their R's. So the word Splendor Tree would be just like a nightmare to pronounce. They literally begged me, please do not use this name. But we knew the other big image that came was this idea of what a tree means in Kenya. So in Kenya, many areas are wooded, but a lot of it is kind of sparse savanna. And in those areas, there are seasonal streams that when the dry season comes, because there's no shade to protect those streams, the streams dry up, and which means that year-round vegetation is very difficult. There's kind of seasons of lushness and then long seasons of sparseness because of the drought and rainy seasons. But while we had been doing the research and development, I had gone to this children's home, and they had decided that part of their disciplinary action for their kids would be whenever a kid got in trouble, they were going to give the child a sapling, and that their discipline was they had to water that 3 times a day for months and months and months and months and months. Until that area actually became this wooded canopy. The trees grew up tall enough that the tops of the trees grew together and formed this shade, which meant that the seasonal stream running through their property became a year-round river that allowed irrigation for constant. Literally, the temperature of that area, when you're on the equator, shade makes all the difference. There's not much humidity. So it's literally are you standing in the sun or are you standing in the shade? And it can drop the temperature by 10 or 20 degrees. And so it's literally cooler in that little valley than it is anywhere around. And it just drew this picture for me of what it means when you provide a safe, nurturing place for something to flourish. If our school could become a canopy for our students, where they could have this safe, nurturing place to thrive, but then they themselves grow up into a canopy where their people can find refuge in their leadership.
It's beautiful.
Within their community. And then the life part came from the fact that we realized that this is a lifestyle. It's a lifestyle we're putting them into at our school, and it's a lifestyle they will have to maintain. It's not just a position of leadership. It's this rhythm of lifestyle. So that's where Canopy Life came from. Sorry for the long drawn out story, but it's very deep and rich to me. It has a lot of ties to this idea that we want our kids to become a refuge where other people can take shelter in their leadership when they grow up. So
yeah, it's a beautiful image.
Yeah. So I guess that's when Canopy Life probably was officially documented.